stop here. This is the place.
One of the things that I love is that two films idea of your life. And there's two stories you can tell. One that is safe and full of regret, and one that is risky and full of pride and joy. This place seems to be a stepping stone across that bridge that is so scary to walk across.
I have tons of things with me because as I'm preparing for this, I'm telling everyone I know, oh, it's kind of like a TED Talk for creatives. And so I'm preparing this TED Talk and what I think that's supposed to be and what it's going to look like. And then you get here and do lectures and all of these people. What this talk is it's alive. And it's changed so much because I've changed so much being here. All right, I'm going to need some Kleenex. Okay, where do I even put all of my stuff? Okay, so this talk, has changed so much in being here, and I think it was great when I came here just because I have a lot to tell and I have a lot to share, and I've had a wonderful life. And so it's changed so much, though, because of meeting all of you, and it touched my heart, seeing all of you guys raise your hands, because I didn't realize that I had met so many people, and then what you have to say about me, little me, it's too much. So where do I begin? Let's start here. Oh, video.
When we were young, we would search the house high and low for items with which to build a fort. It didn't matter who was there, as long as they were ready to build. Together, we'd use our ingenuity and existing resources to build a new space we could call our own. We'd build this incredible environment, one we felt safe and smart and creative in, and then peek outside the door and tell others to come in. The name is a throwback to just that, fort. We take reclaimed and recycled materials, old pieces of furniture, and build them anew. Giving the pieces a new life, while giving ourselves a sense of purpose. When you use locally sourced reclaimed building materials, you see an immediate opportunity to demonstrate that local production is not only possible, but you also start to understand the immediate benefits of such an operation. We invite others in to do the same through our DIY workshops and communal dinners. We want to take what we've started and build it out, making it accessible to all, taking our space and making it yours. Through our Resident Maker program, local residents will learn from the best, refine their ideas, and launch their creative products through Fort. Resident makers will agree to give workshops themselves in a pay-it-forward-like fashion. The maker community can be self-generating, viral, and scalable, thus increasing and magnifying its social impact. 2050 will be a year in which people of LA have a community resource to make their own way through creative endeavors, producing jobs, building community, feeling a sense of connection, and having a real impact on the environment by diverting materials away from the landfills to be used for incredible projects. Los Angeles is ripe for a project like Fort, given that we dispose of 9 million tons of waste per year. 40% of what ends up in our waste streams are building materials. The single largest category of waste in our waste stream. Glass, iron, steel, wood. There's not an immediate recycling program for them. They will end up in the landfills. The mission is to create a market for raw reclaimed materials through the ingenuity of the creative community in LA. We are doing this at Fort through an exchange of reclaimed materials from various committed sources and partnerships with BEDC and Mentor Matchmaker. We want to build upon some of the winners of last year's LA 2050, offering free workshops to the kids of the Salamander Project, working closely with Green Dot and No Right Brain Left Behind. We want to give the power back to individuals, the ability to design their physical spaces, develop their communities, and build businesses. People want to feel connection to the people who make their goods and to how they're made. They want to feel connected to the people of this city and the stories behind them. It's really about a feeling of wanting to relate again. Fort, let us help you build yours.
Thank you. So that was a video submission for a grant that we we submitted to, a grant called LA 2050. And we were in the top, we were in first place for 6 days, and then 8th day, we got it taken away, and someone else won, and it was a downtown organization. And they were doing things to help the homeless. So I understand why, but if anybody else out there wants to give us $100,000, let us know. So where to begin? Yeah, that's my company, and it's been a lot of fun. But I kind of want to talk to you more about the things that I'm really interested in and why perhaps I would grow up to do something like this. So where should we begin? Where I thought we were going to begin, I forgot about the video, is here. If you haven't already, and this picture isn't, it's a little grainy, but if you haven't already, sometime tonight, go and lay in front of the teepees and look up at the sky. It's something that has always created a sense of wholeness for me, and I've always been really interested in. And I've thought about many a night growing up and wondering about the shape of space, and is it infinite or is it finite, and what's it shaped like, and all of that. But since I don't know those answers, I'm not an astrophysicist, I want to talk to you about something that my second and third favorite thing to think about, and things that I feel like I have a little bit better grasp on, and that is of potential and perspective. Okay, so thinking about potential, again, questions about infinite versus finite come up. I wonder, do we have infinite potential in the universe? Do we ourselves have infinite potential? Is there a cap? And I think that one of the guys who touches best on this subject, his name is Bill Bryson, and then also Jedediah said, always read intros to books. I almost didn't read this to you guys because I was I'm going to show a video and then I'm going to read, but he said always read intros to books, and I think that this is perhaps one of the best. He writes, "Welcome and congratulations. I am delighted you could make it. Getting here wasn't easy, I know. In fact, I suspect it was a little tougher than you realize. To begin with, for you to be here now, trillions of drifting atoms had to somehow assemble in an intricate and intriguingly obliging manner to create you. It is an arrangement so specialized and particular that it has never been tried before, and it will only exist just this once. For the next many years, we hope, these tiny particles will uncomplainingly engage in all the billions of deft, cooperative efforts necessary to keep you intact and let you experience the supremely agreeable but generally underappreciated state known as existence." He goes on to say, "Not only have you been lucky enough to be attached since time immemorial to a favorite evolutionary line, but you've also been extremely, make that miraculously, fortunate in your personal ancestry. Consider the fact that for 3.8 billion years, a period of time older than Earth's mountains, rivers, and oceans, every one of your forebears on both sides had to be attractive enough to find a mate, healthy enough to reproduce, and sufficiently blessed by fate and circumstances to live long enough to do so. Not one of your pertinent ancestors was squashed, devoured, drowned, starved, stranded, stuck fast, untimely wounded, or otherwise deflected from its life quest of delivering a tiny charge of genetic material to the right person in the right moment in order to perpetuate the only possible sequence of hereditary combinations that would result eventually, astoundingly, and all too briefly in you. So I think about that a lot, and I think that that's something that's actually been apparent to me. I've always felt so lucky. And my mom said from the time that I was able to, I woke up every day with a smile on my face. And I think that that's why. I think somewhere in me I know that. And we won the lotteries of all lotteries being born, and we won the lotteries of all lotteries of all lotteries being here. Oh, geez, this is going to be tough. So, thinking about potential and then thinking about perspective, those are my second and third favorite things to think about. I then subsequently think about how they relate to one another. And we've talked a little bit about potential and then like how we even got here, but then I want to talk a little bit about perspective for a little bit. And my perspective begins, as all of ours do, at conception. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys this. So we had nothing to do with getting here, as Bill Bryson said. We had nothing to do. We were 0% responsible for how we got here, who helped us get here. But we are 100% responsible for what we do with our experience. And I think Brandon said it. I think I'm just going to keep hearkening back to everybody else who said things. But Brandon said, I don't know if it was his quote or one of his favorite quotes, that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. So getting back to perspective, ours begins at conception. And my conception, it wasn't that long ago, but it feels like a world away. So when I was conceived, my mom was 18 years old, and a single woman, unemployed, all of these things. And those would be a lot to be concerned about. But perhaps one of the biggest concerns that the people around her had was the burden she was placing on her child and what that would be for what life would be like for me. They were terribly concerned because this child was going to be, dare I say it, half black. And so this was all something I just became familiar with. I didn't know that anyone in my family was concerned about what this meant for my life and what that would be. People were telling my mom, where is she going to, where will there be a place for her in this world? Not being all black, not being all white, how could she ever fit in? And so that was a terrible concern for many people. My mom was urged to abort me. My mom was urged to give me up for adoption. And I didn't know any of this until now, so in asking my mom about perspective and all of that. And so it's just wild to look back at your own history and figure out the things that were happening before you were born, and the fact that you potentially could never have been here. So I think that my perspective, though, began with my mom's perspective. And I asked my mom, did this hurt you? Did this upset you? And she said, no. She said, I was so excited. I was so excited to have you. And I said, well, how did you answer these questions when people would tell you, what is she going to, what's her culture going to be? My mom would say, my child's culture is what I and her father will give her. And that is what culture is for you. That's what culture is for me. That's what culture is for anyone. And so regardless of what my skin was going to look like, my culture was going to be the traditions and the values that both my mom and my dad would give me. And so I just think that that's incredible that at 18 years old, she had that understanding. She had that foresight. And so she had me, and let's see, that's my mom, and that's me. And once she had me, we were driving along, and we got very close, I guess, to my great-grandparents' house. And she and my mom and my dad, stopped at a gas station because we didn't have cell phones at that time. And they called my great-grandparents, and they said, we have your very first great-grandchild with us. We want to introduce you to her. And my great-grandparents, like I said, I just found this out, said, we don't want you to bring her here. What will the neighbors say? Which is just shocking to me to hear these things, because I grew up incredibly loved. And so I'm shocked to hear these things. But they didn't want to be seen with a half-black child. So later on, they came and met me, and they loved me, and then they said they didn't care what the neighbors said. But that was my mom and me. And she said also there were things that happened, just like strangers would come over and they would coo over me, and they would say, oh my gosh, we were living in Hawaii at the time, oh my gosh, is this a Hawaiian baby? And my mom would say, no, this is my baby, and she's half black, and they would like drop my hand in disgust and walk away. And so my mom endured, I think, quite a few of these things, and I asked her again, I said, Mom, wasn't that painful for you? Wasn't that hard for you to hear? And she said, no, I often laughed. It made me laugh, she said, at the irony of it, because the same people who would flock to you and like coo over you, just at knowing what your genetic makeup was, they would, leave in disgust. And so for me, it was just kind of very ironic and kind of funny. And so that has everything to do with my perspective on things and how I guess, employ humor as well. Later, and this just speaks to my mom's humor, later, my mom, already having 4 children of her own, and then later 6, but when she had 4 kids, she decided she also wanted to open our home to foster children. And so that was an incredible experience as well. And she was on the phone with one of the social workers, and I'm sure Veronica has many experiences with the bureaucracy of social work, but she was on the phone with one of the social workers, and the social worker was asking her a litany of questions. How many bedrooms do you guys have? We have 5. How many bathrooms? 2. Asking all of these questions. And then they asked my mom, and what race are you? And my mom hesitated and didn't want to answer it. But finally, reluctantly, she said, I'm white, but I have no idea what this has to do with, who you would place here. And she said, well, if you are white, then we can't place any black children in your home. And again, with my mom's perspective and her sense of humor, she said, oh my God. She's like, then please tell me, what do you want me to do with the ones that are already here? Referring to me and my brother. And so we brought kids in, and we saw that. We saw different kinds of lives and what other people were going through at a very, very young age. And so, my mom's pretty awesome. So, and her name's Teresa, her mother Teresa. So, all these kids. So, my brother and I were half black. My mom ended up getting remarried, and the man that she remarried when I was 4, and he legally adopted me. And so now I had not 1 white parent, but I had 2. And then subsequently white siblings. And it's funny to me that I'm even talking to you guys about race, because it's had very little to do with my life. But looking back, I'm like, oh, this is kind of how I look at things, and this is why I look at things, so I have to bring it up. So this is my brother, Justin. We had an awesome childhood. My mom made me she crocheted this Pippi Longstocking and then put wire hangers. We didn't have very much money, so she made everything for us. We just had an amazing childhood. I swear my mom is like Mary Poppins and Sound of Music, and so she sang to us and all of that. But this is my brother, and my brother, we, like all siblings, we fought a lot, but we also had a lot of fun. But when I was a junior in college, my mom called me and she's like, I want to talk to you about the L Word. I was like, the L Word, the show? Like, do you think I'm a lesbian? I didn't know what she was talking about. She was like, the L Word, Justin's here. Anyway, he has leukemia. And I was like, what? My brother was 16. My brother was 17 at the time when he was diagnosed. He was the strongest, like, most fit individual you would ever meet. He ran 5 miles uphill every day, ate well and all of that, but we found out that he had leukemia. He, thank goodness, was transported. I'm from Rock Island, Illinois. I grew up there. But he was transported to the University of Iowa Hospital because it was the closest hospital and the best closest hospital. And I was fortunately going to school there. So I got to spend 8 hours a day, 6 to 8 hours a day every day in the hospital with my brother while he was fighting this disease. And so he didn't make it. And I miss him so much. But let's see, that's him when we were older. That's him, that's his last basketball game. We're like crazy sports people, too much. We like grew up playing basketball, super, super competitive. Yeah, I make everything into a competition, but he was he was being recruited to like Division I schools, and just a fantastic athlete, fantastic individual. 1,500 people came to his funeral. It was at the gym at Rock Island High School, and he never quit trying. He was a winner, and he taught me so much about life. He taught me so much about life, especially in that last eight months. Just a funny side note, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced a loss like this or experienced someone going through cancer and chemo, but chemo does crazy things to your body. One time I walked into the hospital room and his like arm was the size of a watermelon, like right here was just the size of a watermelon. And I'm just like, what is going on with the doctors? Because, I mean, I'm 20, my parents are an hour away. They came as much as they could, but I was just kind of like, I was kind of in charge because I was there. I was like, what is going on? And they said, well, his arm is swollen. I said, yes, that's obvious. I said, and then I said, but why? And they said, well, because, there's a lot of liquid that is, that is going into this area. I was like, I know what swollen means. Why? And they're like, we don't know. And it was, they said it's just an effect of the chemo. And what I was going to tell you before is that his hands oftentimes he would be in a lot of pain through his hands. He said that they would always burn, and one of his favorite things to do was play video games, and so we had a video game system set up there, and so when he couldn't play because he was in too much pain, he would ask me to play for him. And I hated video games, but I would play these video games, and he would watch me, and he would cheer me on, and that's what we did in the hospital. And we played a lot of Connect 4. I won most of the time. So my brother died, and again, like darkness. And at this point in my life, these beautiful bits of light were really hard to see through the tears. And so I didn't know what to do. I spent a lot of time in my room just looking at the wall. I wasn't expecting to cry so much. Could I have some Kleenex, please? But I spent a lot of time like looking at the wall and thinking to myself, I might just be better off sitting in a sane asylum just staring at the wall, because then no one would expect anything from me. And that's what I thought. So anyway, somebody said, I met this guy in Iowa, and he lived in Los Angeles, and I just thought that was the most amazing place and the most amazing thing. I was like, what's Los Angeles like? What's California like? And so, growing up in the Midwest, thank you. Growing up in the Midwest, it's like cornfields for miles, and everything is flat, And I'm so glad I grew up there. I'm so glad I grew up there. I feel like I have the values and appreciation for people that stems from the Midwest. But I needed to, at that time in my life, I needed to explore. And so I came out to Los Angeles for 9 days, and I just saw things I had never seen before. This is Yosemite, and it's just breathtaking. You gotta go. It's so surreal because we're not used to that kind of majestic beauty. And I tried all these different foods. I remember distinctly tasting cilantro for the first time, which is now just like a basic thing, but tasting cilantro, and I'm like, what was that? And I'm like digging through my salad to find something that is unfamiliar to me, to find something that looks unfamiliar, and like tasting it. I'm like, what is this? And sushi and Ethiopian food, and like my taste buds were like going crazy. I got lost in Chinatown, downtown Los Angeles. And the oceans, the terrain and all of that, and I got lost. I got lost downtown, and I couldn't find my way out, and I was lost in Chinatown, and no one I asked spoke English, and I was like, what is going on? What is this place? So I called home to my mom, and I said, Mom, I love this place. This place is so amazing. I felt like I'd been missing out on the whole world. And my mom just took a deep breath. I didn't even mention to her any of this, but my mom just took a deep breath, and knowing me, she's like, you're not coming back, are you? And I said, I'll come back, but it's to pack up my bags. I gotta come explore. And so being in Los Angeles and living there, I've lived there for 13 years now, but being there, all of these people, which is what I gravitated towards, meeting new people and figuring out things from different walks of their lives. Los Angeles, the surrounding area, there are 11 million, there were 11 million inhabitants like a few years ago, and then now I think it's up to like almost 17. But there are a lot of people, which is amazing. It's amazing because you can meet a lot of new people, but it's also like a big problem because with such a high concentration and with the way that our culture is and our society goes, we waste so much. And so with a lot of people, there was also a lot of trash. And I recognize that. It's all over the streets in many parts of Los Angeles. And I read this book. It's called Garbology, and you guys should definitely read it, Our Dirty Love Affair with Trash. And I just want to let you guys know, you should read it, but one tidbit from it is we waste so much. We are literally burying people alive in our trash. People who live or who work in landfills, sometimes there are landfill avalanches where like our trash buries them alive. And so think about what you need and what you don't need, and recycle as much as you can. But then recycling, the way that we recycle is so backwards. So all these plastic bottles, we actually ship a lot of them overseas, and we get rid of a lot of our trash, and we ship them overseas, and then we have people in other countries melt down our plastic, and a lot of these people die at much younger ages because of the chemicals that are burning off into their atmosphere. And so I was thinking about this and about how we recycle, and I started just looking at things differently and looking at recycling and reclaiming differently, and just the beauty in the things that we were throwing out. And I chose this picture just because I think it's really beautiful. But these are just odds and ends that were either reclaimed or just sitting around, and I just think it's really beautiful. It's just pieces and bits, but put together in a way that I think is beautiful. And I think that that's what I'm saying about perspective is like we just have to kind of look at things a little differently. So this was my first piece that I reclaimed. This is a piece that was hand-carved from the early 1900s. Its craftsmanship is just phenomenal. And this was a piece that was going to be thrown away and just end up in the landfill. I can't believe it. So I ended up, I got started because I moved into a really big house with a boyfriend at the time, and neither of us had $50,000 to adequately furnish with. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out our furniture situation. And I went to Crate and Barrel, and I was like, I like this table, but it's not big enough for our space. So I looked at it, and I thought, it doesn't look like it'd be that hard to build. And not having any experience with power tools, I called my dad, and I asked him what would I need to make a table, and he said a table saw. So I went on Craigslist. Looking back, it was kind of silly. I looked for the cheapest table saw. When you have a deadly machine in your hands, you kind of want a good one. But it was $50, and it was all I could afford. So I wrote to the guy, and I said, I want this table saw. I said, I'll be there tomorrow. I have money in hand. Thanks so much, Jack. I show up, and he said, are you picking this up for your brother or your dad, or who's this for? And I said, it's for me. I'm Jack. And he was like, oh, I thought you were a guy. I said, I'm not. And so he was like, do you know how to use a table saw? And I said, no. And he said, do you know how to turn it on? I said, no. And he's like, I can't sell you this table saw. I said, had I been a man, you wouldn't have asked me any of these questions. I said, give me my table saw. So we fought over the saw for a little bit, and reluctantly, he finally said, okay. And he said, but let me show you a few things. He showed me how to use a push stick, to push the wood through so I wouldn't cut off my fingers. And he was very patient with me and very kind, and showed me how to turn it on. And he put it in the back of my SUV, and he said, please be careful. And luckily, I still have all of my fingers. And so I packed up the table saw, I took it home, and then I was like, okay, now what do I need? A lot like Veronica. She's like, okay, I got my sewing machines. What else do you need? And I was like, okay, I'm going to need some wood. And so I went to Home Depot, and the wood was so expensive. And I was just like, I feel like I can find wood somewhere else, cheaper. So back on Craigslist. And I saw that this bookstore was closing down in Santa Monica, and I was like, and they were getting rid of all their shelves. And so it was just like a bookstore that had been there for 80 years, and the wood was beautiful. It had a book lover's touch on it. And so I went down there, and I demolished all the shelves, and I packed them all up. And I took it home, and I built my first table. And then I ended up furnishing this 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom, tons of balcony space. I ended up furnishing it all with things that I had either made or found from reclaimed and recycled materials. But this was the first one that I found because I was driving by. I made the table, and then chairs, I couldn't figure out. They have to be weight bearing, and I had trouble with. And a few bruises as well. So I started thinking about other things, like how do I make chairs? How do I get chairs? And I drove by this thing called an estate sale, which I was unfamiliar with, and I went in, and I fell in love with old pieces. And this was my first piece, and there was the end of the estate sale, and they were going to throw everything else away. And I said, well, how much for this thing? I'll pay you for it. And so I gave them $60 for this. And I drove it straight to an antique shop just because I was curious. And they said that it was worth in the upwards of $2,500. So this is my first piece, and I love it. I miss it. I sold it. Not to the antique shop. I had it for years, but then I sold it when I started my company. But yeah, old furniture has a soul, and I fall in love with the pieces that I make and that I have and that I reclaim. And this one is special to me. So we throw away so many things. These things were going to be thrown away, and I just started looking at forms and shapes, and I was just like, what do we do with things that don't have seats, or the things that people don't have uses for? This used to be a log holder. You put logs for next to the fireplace, and it was cool. But I was just like, I want it to be more functional than that. I want it to, and it was rusty, so no one wanted it. And so I got rid of the rust and repainted it, and I wanted it to be more functional. And I love to read. as Cheryl knows. Hi, Cheryl. It's crazy. Side note, it's so crazy because a few weeks ago I was having a hard time with a lot of things, and I was just like, what Jedediah said. He was like, you want to change the way that you're thinking. You want to, you just want to get out and you want to do something different. And I was like, I got to change the way that I'm thinking. Like, how do I do this? Oprah will know. So I'm like YouTubing Oprah, and Oprah was like, read this book from this woman. And I saw your interview with her, and this book was called Brave Enough. And I got it in the mail. I ordered it because I just do whatever Oprah tells me to do. I ordered it. I'm kidding, I don't. But I ordered it, and when I got it, I was disappointed, actually. I was disappointed because it was a book of quotes. And I'm like, quotes? I thought I was going to be reading like a story. And I'm like, quotes, what is this? And I was like, I can get quotes from Pinterest. Like, what? And I started to read these quotes, and they just kept hitting me and hitting me and hitting me. I started to like circle the quotes. I started to take pictures of the quotes and send them to my loved ones that I thought needed them most. And it's a beautiful book. Thank you so much for that. And I had no idea that she was going to be here. The universe works in amazing ways. It's so magical. Like I ordered every one of her books after I read that, and then like I've been reading them, and then I get here and. Yeah, the woman who's been with me for the last few weeks just happens to be here in person, so pretty awesome. So I started looking at shapes and forms, and that log carrier, because I love to read, became a bookshelf. And so, yeah, and it's in a home of who's now my friend Molly, because people would come in the shop and I would talk to them. And so for me, it's not really that much about furniture as much as it is about the people that are going to be using the furniture and the people that have used the furniture. And this woman came in, and she is just an unbelievable soul. And she's dealt with a lot of things in her life, and you wouldn't know it because she's just so beautiful. But she bought it, and she has it, and it's very special to me. Very special to me, the piece, and that it's now with her. So furniture, I'm not that big into furniture per se. I just love, I love the psychology behind it. So when I go into estate sales, one of my friends, because estate sales happen for many reasons. Sometimes people are moving out of the country. Sometimes people just want to start fresh. And sometimes people do pass away, or they're moving to an old folks home, or a different living situation for themselves. And so one time my friend said to me, she was just like, oh my God. She's like, I hate to even talk about her, like her voice. But it really was. It was just like a really nasty comment. She's like, oh my God. She's like, how can you just like go in there and then just like, don't you feel bad? You're like reaping the benefits of somebody's death. And I was just like, wow. I never thought about it that way. And that's what I'm talking about with perspective. Like, I never thought about it that way. And I hope and pray that when my time comes, that somebody comes in and treasures my life collection in the way that I do. And so it's just so funny different ways people look at things. And so I love going into people's homes and seeing how they lived and what they cared for, and thinking about their grandchildren running around the house, sitting at the table. So yeah, it's just like I just started looking at furniture much differently. Oh, what else? Oops, here are some just textiles and fabrics, and like a lot of these things, everything here is going to be thrown away. That window, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but it was just so beautiful to me. I had to save it. So I could have taken two paths. You guys talk about two films. One of my two films would have been like, I could either become a hoarder and just like have everything just be holed up in my home with all these different things that I just all thought were so beautiful, or I could do something with them, and I decided to do something with them. But this window, I just grabbed because I just loved it so much. I didn't know what to do with it. This was from our first lookbook, our first, our first first photo shoot, and I didn't know what to do with the window, but I loved it, and so I had it. And then when I got my shop, I was like, now I know what to do with it. there was a door that like coming in, and it's in a building, a loft building, and like I didn't have a storefront, and so I was like, I'm gonna make my own storefront in this building. So I decided to make a door out of this window, and that's what you see in the video. I don't know if you guys remember, but like when you come to Fort, you're like, I push this door out of the way, and there's a big window, and that window is kind of like, yeah, it was my storefront, and everybody walking by the loft space could peek in, but I ended up using that, and I didn't know what it was going to be for when I got it, but it was a staple. So talking about perspective, I think that perspective, how they relate, potential and perspective, I think, we had nothing to do with getting here, but then now that we're here, it's like, it's completely on our shoulders what we do with our existence. And I think that our potential relies heavily on perspective. It can either limit or help your potential flourish. And so I was interviewed by this magazine called Darling Magazine. It's pretty it's a pretty feminine magazine, I would say. I think it's for women, the art of, I forget something, but Darling Magazine. And much like the people who were talking to my mom about, like, oh, your child's going to be so disadvantaged. You're going to be so disadvantaged because she's half black. Just this particular interviewer, I don't know, the way that she asked me about being a woman, and she was like, what's it like being a girl in this industry? Like, I just felt like she was taking so much pity on me. And she's like, isn't it so hard for you? And then I was like, huh? What? I was like, no. I said, I learned how to weld. I was like, I go into the shop, and it's the opposite. I think that because, I'm not another man, the guys don't like puff out their chest, and there's not this big testosterone war going on or anything. They're like, oh, cool, there's a girl here. Let's help her. Let's teach her. And so I think it's just kind of about perspective. Like I've been very, very fortunate. When I started my company, I didn't have any money to do it with. I didn't have an education in business at all. And these things, the disadvantages became advantages. So not having money, I became very resourceful. I started looking for free materials, which were things that were being thrown away. And not having an education in business, it's hard to like kind of figure these things out as you go, but it also allows for you to be much more creative. And looking back, I think this quote like comes from like my perspective and comes from my mom, and like being comfortable with who I am. At any time, in your life, you should be comfortable with that and just take it in. And obviously, there are all things that we all want to work on, but just like be happy, be happy with where you are, and know that you're going somewhere better. Let's see. So I started like with the furniture, but then like again, it's not about the furniture for me. It's about like coming around a table and sitting down. And so started having community events, dinners, talks. We even had a concert, which the building managers were not happy about. There's something called So Far Sounds. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, if any of you guys heard about it. So Far Sounds, they just like put on these concerts in random places, people's backyards, living rooms, and we had a big concert here. Then it was like not enough. Like there's so much trash. Like there's so many things going to waste. This is like leather. I have pounds and pounds and pounds of leather, which is expensive, that is just being thrown away. And so I go and I collect it, and I ask people to save it for me, and I can't use all of the things that I'm collecting. So started doing DIY workshops and teaching people to make things from reclaimed, recycled materials. That's one. So, wrapping up, I was in Portland last week, and I sat down with a farmer, and we were talking, and I've been asking everybody, like, what do you think potential is? What do you think about perspective? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, yeah, it's like a seed. Everything you need, everything that you can become, that's possible for you to become, is just like wrapped up in this tiny vessel. And we are very much like that. Like, we were born with all of these amazing abilities, and you know, and what we were going to become and what we could become. But what's different about us and seeds is that a seed doesn't have any way to change its environment. So if there's a drought, it could die. If there's a flood, it could die. We have the ability to change our environments, to change, you know, our situations, to change the people that we're on. Again, like Veronica was saying, you know, in a family situation that's very difficult, and she's just like, okay, I'm going to change. The buck stops here, and so we have that ability. And if you're ever in a place where you're not growing like you should be, get out, and yeah, find the people that do make you feel whole, and do, you know, and find the situations. And for me, moving to Los Angeles was a huge step, a huge growth. And so again, it's just like, yeah, it's just there's just a world of possibilities. And I think anytime I feel lost and about that, I return here. Thank you.